But really, the national news everybody's talking about is our quote-unquote backup, Heinrich Harburg, coming in and really showing that the dude knows how to play football. He knows how to play football.
But I basically made it known the official position of this podcast last night.
Yeah.
Are we in agreement on that?
Absolutely.
Okay, so yeah. So the Cornhusker Corner official position of this podcast is that Heinrich Harburg needs to be the starting quarterback for Nebraska moving forward.
Absolutely. So even before this week's game, I was pretty high on Harburg, just from the little I had seen of him, and I had seen enough of Jeff Sims. And for those that may be listening for the first time, or just don't know my background, I didn't play football at a high level, but I feel like I played at a high enough level. I played a year or so in college. I was a quarterback and then a wide receiver. I know how to read defenses. I know a little bit more than the average football fan. So when I look at quarterbacks, I can kind of look at it from their point of view. I'm very sympathetic towards quarterback in terms of, because people are so hard on them and they don't not realize how hard it is to sit there, think about the line, read the defense, then your mechanics just make the throw and just do all that without thinking. It's so hard to do. But seeing that, there are guys that can do it and there are guys that can't. There are guys that have the skills and there are guys that don't. And then there are guys that know how to play the position that may not have the physical attributes that another guy might. Right. And that's how I was looking at, because if you look at Jeff Sims, right, he is a physical specimen. He needs to be on the field in some sort of capacity. And it's just kind of highlighted. I don't know how good he is at reading defenses. Mm-hmm. So I saw Harburg last night read the defense, either tuck it or make the throw on a second, third read quickly, right in an instant. So I really think that he has a good motor to run. I mean, he almost ran for 100 yards last night, and he can throw the ball really well and accurately. And the contour, what I didn't expect is the Verduzco was still in him.
Yeah, the arm angles. The arm angles. Yeah. For sure.
Right before he threw that touchdown pass to Fedoni.
He even altered his arm angle a little bit on that one.
He did.
Because there was a window, like a sort of diagonal window he had to fit the ball through to get it to Fedoni.
Yeah, so there was one, but the one right before that he just kind of tossed to the flat to Fedoni. And I was just like, how did he get it around the defender? Like, it wasn't a big gain, but it was an impressive throw. It was impressive. So I look at him and I think you get that guy confidence and you get that guy an offensive line, and this offense could be clicking.
I completely agree. Look, I want to touch on something you said, which was about, some people have it and some people don't. And up until the Adrian Martinez era, that had sort of been the story of Nebraska quarterbacks. Let's put it this way, from like the Callahan era all the way through to probably Adrian Martinez, you would know pretty much right off the bat when a quarterback played if they were going to be good or not. I don't want to say there was no development in those guys. I think some of the guys, Taylor Martinez and Tommy Armstrong, developed over time. But a lot of those guys you saw right off the bat if they were going to be a good, efficient quarterback for you or if they were not. Now, when Adrian came in, he sort of threw that archetype out the window because he showed you a lot of things that suggested that he could be the guy, but then he would, not very clutch in very key moments. So I really think that the story of this quarterback room so far this year has been what I was talking about before, whereas Jeff Sims has shown you what he is. He's shown you at multiple schools, and people downplay Georgia Tech. They're like, oh, well, he was at Georgia Tech before, so maybe he'll be good here. And, I see where they're coming from, coming into a different offense. Maybe something could happen. But the guy is the leading turnover machine in the quarterback position in all of college football for the course of time he's played football. And they weren't playing FCS teams every week at Georgia Tech. They were playing an ACC schedule. So it's a good sample size to really see what kind of player he is. And again, I don't think Jeff Sims is a bad guy. I think, matter of fact, last night I thought he showed a lot of sportsmanship and a lot of team leadership.
High character.
Night. Yes.
I was
100%.
Actually thinking last night, I was thinking, honestly, I want to touch on this a little bit. Like, who knows how hurt he actually is.
Let's get our tinfoil hats on.
Yeah, let's get the tinfoil hats on there. Jeff Sims proved last night why Rule sticks by him, because he is a leader. He's a man of high character, which you want those people on the team and you want them engaged because that helps your team. And that's why I say he needs to get on the field.
I agree with that.
I just don't think that he needs to be the quarterback.
Handling snaps. We don't need him in any position to be handling snaps. I mean, I'm sorry, like, you watch quarterbacks, even turnover-prone quarterbacks, dropping a snap like that is so rare. And most of the time when you drop a snap like that, it's a quick little reminder, pay attention when the snap comes, and
Yeah.
you move on. You clear the slate and you move on. Or that it's bad snaps. We've seen that at Nebraska sometimes, not necessarily the quarterback's fault. When Juergens was a freshman, he
Juergens,
had
yeah.
issues with that. But I don't know, like what I was saying before about you being able to see almost definitively, pretty much right off the bat, if they're going to be operating at a high level in the offense or not. With Heinrich, it was so obvious from the jump that this dude is confident. He's ready for the moment. He's fiery. I mean, you could see the team sort of rallying around him as he was running dudes over. I mean, look, we talked about Jeff Sims and how good of a runner he is, and he is a good runner. I'll stand by that. He's a good, and I think he's even a physical runner. He wasn't sliding, but I think Heinrich proved last night that maybe he's not quite the athletic specimen that Sims is, but he's still plenty athletic, and he's an incredibly efficient runner with very good vision. It was awesome to see. Like our QB draw game last night was deadly.
Starting QB, and this was a topic from last week, and because we didn't know, and it kind of sounds like the staff knew what was going to happen right away. Like,
right.
Either tinfoil hat or if Sims just can't go.
Right.
But starting QB, I did find it interesting. If Sims was not healthy enough, he dressed. I found that interesting. And I did see a couple other talking heads out there point that out, but I saw that during the game and I was like, that's like if he wasn't good enough to go and they just want to rest him and they want Harburg is just gonna be the backup to start because Sims can't go. Why is he dressed?
Right.
It's interesting.
Well, I mean, the way I read that whole situation with him dressing Sims out was basically like there were things that Northern Illinois' defense did after the first drive to adjust for Heinrich Harburg being the starting quarterback. They did some things differently that they probably wouldn't have done with Sims in the game, just because Nebraska does a few things differently with Heinrich than they do with Jeff Sims. But with that being said, I just think it was more of the fact of like Matt Rule playing a little bit of poker out there and not wanting to show his hand until the very final moment, because it's important. I mean, he even said it in his press conference. Someone asked him like, how important do you think it was to get out there and to score on your first drive? And he even said it just like this. He was like, I think we needed that. Like, I think we needed that. And so I think there's an element of we need to catch these dudes by surprise as much as we can. So I don't know if I would read too much into that, as far as supposedly Jeff Sims was the third string quarterback for the night, and he would have been used in emergency situations had we needed to use him. And so I think that's all it is. The situation is he was healthy enough to dress out, to walk around on the sidelines and not look gimpy. And he was healthy enough to potentially, if we were in a situation we needed to use him, to try to operate out there. So that I'm just reading into it like that. Now, as far as this week goes, I mean, supposedly he has a high ankle sprain, and you and I both know that ankles are weird, and that sometimes you can sometimes you can roll an ankle in the middle of a game, go onto the sideline, walk it off, and play the next series. And other times you roll it, you feel maybe all right, but it just lingers for weeks. And so it'll depend on how that heals. But again, I just think the efficiency that Harburg showed, I think he proved it to us. I really do. I think he proved it.
You know what? I do too. And we're not the head coach. We're not getting paid millions of dollars. We have not coached or played at that level that they're operating on. And if we can see it, you'd have to think, right? You have to think, because I'm not talking about making plays here and there, because I think Jeff Sims can make plays. Don't get me wrong. I think he can. He's shown that he can in certain things. But the intangibles that of reading a defense, throwing the ball away and not trying to force it, tucking it and running when you just feel pressure and it doesn't feel right. There are certain things to protect the ball and the offense, conserve drives, and keep the game within reach that Harburg did, even when the offense was not humming those tell you a better story than when it does.
Right. Like there's a thing.
Yeah.
Sorry, there's a thing in music called playing in the pocket, and it's such a hard thing to really put your finger on if you haven't done it before. But really, what it is like there's slight differences in the nuances of, like, for instance, how a bass player would play. Whereas if you have one bass player who's playing in the pocket, you feel it. Everyone feels it, even if they don't know it. Versus if you have another bass player in there who might be playing the right notes, but something's just off. And that's sort of how I feel about quarterback in a sense, whereas it's almost a feel thing. Like obviously you can look at stats and you can look at the actual productivity of it, but there's more than that. There's the intangibles of being the quarterback, and that aspect of it is very much a feel thing. And I don't know about you, but about 3 or 4 drives into the game, even though we weren't being super productive yet, it got to the point where I was like, I'm not nervous anymore. Like when our offense is out on the field, I'm not cringing when we're going to throw the ball. I'm not nervous. And what that tells me is there's a chemistry there going on with Harburg and with the team. And I think that there's something to that, because a lot of these guys have been on the team for multiple years and they know Heinrich really well. Thomas Fidoni and Heinrich were roommates. And Gabe's known Heinrich Gabe's obviously known Heinrich for a number of years. Ramir, all the offensive line, they know him. So I'm not saying that like Sims is not a good leader and he doesn't bring that fire. But what I am saying is, no matter who you are, it's hard to establish that type of connection with your team whenever you've only been here for 8 months. I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. So I just think from a feel standpoint, forget about productivity. He was better productivity wise. So like that's a definitive argument, but let's throw that out the window. Just from an intangibles and from a feel standpoint, I think it's obvious who the choice should be. Obvious. It's Heinrich. No doubt about it.
Yeah, I agree. With almost everything you said. Almost everything. That made it sound like there was something I disagree with. There's nothing. No, there's nothing. Well said. Yeah. Well said, my friend. No, there's the intangible, like, decision making within quarterbacks. It's important. Yeah. Alabama's learning that right now the hard way too. You look at that. I mean, they almost lost USF. Yeah. They probably should have.
I'm starting to think that their problem's a little more than quarterback too, because if you watch that game, they sort of got physical a little bit here and there.
Yeah, and USF could have settled for a couple field goals that probably would have almost made them win the game. Yes. Like, you don't know how that would have gone. They
called an aggressive game.
They did. I mean, you have to when you're that big of an
You're playing Alabama.
But but who knows? Back to Nebraska. So starting QB, I would be really surprised if they trot Sims out there this week. How Harburg and the offense played, getting that momentum, because the team needs cohesiveness and they need confidence, because this team with confidence, we could do things this year, not just get it to a bowl game. We could do things with confidence, because the team that lost these past 2 games, you saw it. You saw glimpses of it, and you're just like, they just need confidence. So who knows? I'm
always, whenever you talk about a team's confidence and momentum for a season, I always remember the 2008 season when we had a traditional opening where we played 2 games where we beat the crap out of them. Then we had a game where Virginia Tech came to Nebraska and we lost by like 10 points, decent game, but we lost. And then 3 or 4 weeks later, we played Texas Tech at Texas Tech. And Texas Tech that year, that was like the Mike Leach Texas Tech, pretty much at their peak. And we had been getting killed by them, I think 2 out of the last 3 years prior to that. So it was like, oh, here we go. We're playing Texas Tech. And we took them to the wire and lost in overtime. And even though we lost, there was something that happened to that team after that game that was like, okay, we're not a bad team. That was a legitimate top 10 team we just played, and we took them to the wire. And Sue went off. That was one of the first games I remember at Texas Tech. Just Sue, going off. Anyway, that is what this team needs. Even a couple weeks from now, even if I think we've talked about this on the podcast plenty of time, we've harped on it. College football, especially, is a total game of momentum in the game by game sense, when you're just looking at within a 4-quarter game, and over the season sense. So I think that this is the first time this season that it's like, okay, we've caught a little bit of momentum. Even in that game yesterday, within the game, they caught a little bit of momentum. And now the game itself has lended itself for them to catch a little bit of momentum for the season. So if you're Matt Rule, it's like we finally got a guy at the helm at the quarterback position that's allowed us to catch a little bit of steam. So why would you just shut that off? You know, why would you risk not that it would shut off if Jeff Sims came in? Maybe he steps in and he's better than we remember him being, and all of a sudden the momentum still goes. But why would you risk it? Why would you even risk it? You're here. You're here. The team has confidence. They trust this guy.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. There's one thing that some of the talking heads are talking about, as they like to do, being talking heads. But the NIL piece of that, it's interesting, but that does not have anything to do with coaching or the team in general. It's not like the NFL where you've invested all this money in this person. You've invested all this stuff. That in college especially, those are local businesses that are deciding to do X, Y, and Z.
Yep.
They're deciding to do that. I don't think that plays any sort of part in the coach's decision in college football at this juncture.
Sure. It certainly shouldn't. It certainly shouldn't. Because the point you're making, basically a way to summarize it is, in the NFL, you have a salary cap, and so that's a direct tie to your organization. You have to manage that budget, and you have a boss telling you how to manage the budget. So it big time affects those types of decisions. But in college,
I put millions of money into this one player.
Right, exactly. Yeah. But in college, it's almost always, if it's being done the correct way, a third party that is promoting with the player, and they have a contract and a deal. So it's a third party. And even if you have like some SEC team that's, paying players directly from the school, it's not like there's a salary cap. You know what I mean? It's not. So even if that is the case, like there's no salary cap right now. Yeah. I don't know if there ever will be, but there's no salary cap right now. So I kind of agree with your point. A lot of the talking heads have talked about, Jeff Sims partnered with Acres Solutions. He's coming in, partnering with Amigos. Like they got to ride with this guy. I'm like, that doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean anything.
Doesn't mean anything. Do you remember
a couple right around and sign Heinrich 2 weeks later? They don't care, man.
Yeah. Do you remember when Dr. Pepper sold out on the new Clemson quarterback and he laid an egg that year?
Yeah.
Like,
Uyunglele. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's their choice to make.
Right.
And it's the kids that get to benefit off of that. Like Sims gets to benefit off of that, whether he's producing or not. But I don't think that influences the on the field decision.
Yeah, I'm sure Sims has a very nice apartment that's paid for, and I'm sure that he has plenty of money in his bank account to fly all his family to any game that he wants to fly them to or whatever. So I don't, like we've talked about, you don't want to be too hard, because at the end of the day, this is a game, right? Yeah. Like we love it, and it's more than a game, and all the other. But at the end of the day, this is a game, so you don't want to be too personal against any of these people. No. But at the same time, they're also getting paid. They're just fine. Call it like it is my point. Just call it like it is.